All for joining in. Today is a difficult day for everyone who has been to Israel. The beginning of my presentation will be familiar. I have a short presentation that will show you the main websites that we're going to be looking at today, and then I will go in and actually show you how to research on each of those. So I'm going to share my screen now, and my picture is going to disappear. So today is Holocaust Day. In Israel, they add on Yom HaZikaron LaShoah VeLiGvura, speaking not only of those who died during the Holocaust, but also of those heroes, for instance, people in the ghettos who were able to do their best to get out of the way of the oncoming slaughter, and those who helped to save many people from a certain death. The day begins in Israel at 10 in the morning. This is a year ago, so there are people, there's no social distancing, but you can see the noises you hear are people taking multiple shots with their camera. Traffic comes to a standstill. People get out of their cars, they stand next to their cars, and for 2 minutes, the only sound that you really hear, and you hear it all over the country, from Eilat all the way up to the Banyas, everybody stands quietly, in order to remember everyone. You'll see that even on the highways, cars pull over to the side. We'll see in just a minute when the siren finishes. Now there's someone who was driving. So there are Arabs in the country. They don't really pay attention. There are those who are ultra-Orthodox. They also don't really pay attention. But everyone else hears the siren. It's on the radio stations. It's loud enough for everyone to hear. And everything comes to a standstill, winding down. And those cars are not just parked at the side of the road. Now we're going to see that they take off and go back on their way. But it's a very special and unique way for the country to memorialize all those who have passed. We have a similar thing next week where we commemorate the fallen soldiers of the Israeli army. Okay, our topic for today is how can we find ancestors who were living through the period of the Holocaust, and how might we be able to find out what happened to them? There are several really important websites. The first one is Yad Vashem. Yad Vashem has digital collections. They have their own archives. There's all kinds of other things that you can do. And there are the exhibitions and things. There are a lot of things that are digital that you can look at from the house. We're going to go and look at the Shoah names database, the names of those who perished during the Holocaust. There's also a photo archive. Not the main problem with the photo archive is that most of them do not have names associated with those images. Some of them do. If you're able to identify people in images, you're welcome to go in and see if you can. There are the righteous of the nations who helped to hide some of the Jews from the atrocities that were happening, and they have been slowly recognized and have a special place at Yad Vashem. There's something that's called the Documents Archive, Survivor Testimonies, Deportations Database, and an online film catalog, which are all kinds of films that deal with the Holocaust. Again, I will be going back to all of these when I stop the short presentation and we go into the demonstration part. Bad Arolsen is located in the middle of Germany, and it was chosen as the community for the holdings of the International Red Cross Tracing Service, and all of the records from the various camps that were in Germany and Poland and some of the others forwarded all of their records to this one community that set up a huge archival effort. And they have documents, they have things that were taken from people as they came into the camps. They have all kinds of items. Now, when people began looking for relatives after the war, they would send to the International Red Cross Tracing Service a request to find out what had happened to them. And they would then open up a file for each of the people. And they would look for bank records, they would look for housing records, they would look for any kind of documentation of where they were before the war, if there were transport lists or other kinds of documents when they got to one camp or another. At the entrance to Dachau and Treblinka, people did get a card filled out. At Auschwitz, there were no cards filled out. So there are many documents that were accessed and put into a specific file for each person. And there's what they called a TD number that each person was given, so that when others wanted to find information about the same person, those files could then be easily accessed. So there are now 26 million documents that have been put recently online. You used to, for years, many years, that archive was closed to the public and nobody could get in there. And then about 15 years ago, they opened up the archive so that the people could come and do the research there and try to get documents. And now they've seen that there really is a need for those documents to be available to people online. I will show you how to begin that process. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum has some things that are different from Yad Vashem. It's worth going in and seeing the kinds of information that they have available. And if you are taking a trip to Washington, D.C., you certainly can go and see the museum itself and access their content there at the museum. Some of the things that they have available are resources on survivors and victims, connecting with different survivors, the testimonies of some of the survivors, and more. JDC, the Joint Distribution Committee, were very, very instrumental in helping people who survived and helping them connect with family members. And they have a lot of documents as well. They also had major rescue efforts that they did for people in Yemen and others. They have a names index, which is a good resource for you to know and to check. Ancestry, one of the places we looked at last week. When we go into their card catalog, we will find that they have specific documents that are related to this Bad Arlsen, to this Arlsen archives, that you can research through Ancestry. And Jewish Gen, which we also looked at a little bit. Jewish Gen has some resources for the Holocaust. You won't see it listed in the main menu here. However, we look down, they have a Holocaust database that has more than 2.3 million entries, and we'll see what those mean. There's also Yizkor books, and the whole project of translating the Yizkor books is a very interesting project. You can find some of the Yizkor books in addition to on Jewish Gen. You can find them at the New York Public Libraries. And lastly, the Igra Collection, the Israel Genealogy Research Association, released just a couple of days ago lists of survivors, and they are from a whole host of places. Each of these are not really large databases, but there is altogether quite a lot of documents that were added to our collection. You can't access a complete list. The data is available when you enter a name and search for the name. So we will go ahead and do some of those searches as well. This is an additional collection of those databases that were added just this week. So we do want to remember not to forget and to never let it happen again. Okay, I have to switch now and go to a different. Stop that share. And now I'm going to share a different screen. Okay, so we're going to start off with Yad Vashem. We're going to go into the digital collections, the Show on Names database, and this is going to present us with a very short form. It asks for a last name or a maiden name, a first name, and you could put in a place. My general philosophy in genealogy research is to put in less, to see what results come up, and then to use the filters in order to make the list a little bit smaller. So because I went in earlier, I have a name that I'm going to use for this one. Now, you don't have to put in capital letters, it'll understand. So we're not doing the advanced search right now, just the general search. And it came up with 11 results. This is a name that I'm helping a friend research, and there are some anomalies here that I want to point out to you so that you can understand better what kinds of information is available and how accurate it might be. So the name that I put in was Skursabolski. And here we see that there's something else, and it's spelled very different. One of the and there's also IR, and then there's other names that don't have any relation to Skursabolski at all. When you're doing genealogy research, you have to be very creative with possible spellings. Not all of the search engines will do a sounds like search, most of them do. But even so, if you come up with as many possible spellings as you can, you're going to be surprised at the different kinds of hits you will receive. Now, I know that the reason that we're seeing these top three is because the wife's maiden name was this Skursabolski, which we'll see once we go into the documents. Okay, there's one more thing to point out at the bottom. There is the difference between the spelling with a J or a Y, but actually these two are the same. So now I see that there is a Chaya, which once is spelled C-H-A-I-A, and then there's also a Chaya and another Chaya. One time they have her born in 1900 and two times in 1902, and they have two different birthplaces. Grodno and then another community in Lithuania. And I'm going to tell you that the three of them are the same person. Let's go in and see the kind of information we can find out. I'll click on the last name, and I can see that this happens to be a page of testimony. So the pages of testimony that were filled out and can still be filled out today, if you know of family members and you would like to submit an additional page of testimony, they are always interested in receiving documents that will help to support the information that is already there. So here, as I told you, the last name was Skursabolski when she was born, and she was born to Eliyahu and Frida. So in case you, and then they say that during the war, she was in Grodno. So if we go back for just a second, I can go here. Remember that it's Eliyahu and Frida. Okay, and here again, it's Eliyahu and Frida. And here she's married to Chaim. Need to go back again. Here it just says she was a housewife and married. And if I go and check the last one, okay, so here it says that she was a housewife and married, but it doesn't give the names of her parents. Now, the trick here is, if I were to click on the page of testimony, it's going to come up in Hebrew, which is okay, I can understand it. Parts of it are in English. But if I go in the box that I have here, it tells me that there's something else to click. And this time when it opens up, the page of testimony will be on the right, the original, and the information is translated for me right here in the form. Now here it says that the father's first name is Chaim, but we remember from the first two that actually Chaim was the name of her husband. And if I go over here, I can see that the person who did the translation made a mistake. They asked for the name of the mother in number 6, and there's a question mark, and the name of the father, and there's a question mark. The name of the husband is the next thing, and that is the Chaim. So even though the information is here and it's printed out and it's in a language I can understand it, they made a mistake. So I sent in a request to Yad Vashem to correct their error. I have not heard back from them yet. Okay, so we're going to close that window down. That was one thing that I wanted to show you. Now, the next thing that I wanted to show you is that we have 2 pages of testimony that are filled out by the same person. So if I want to know more about this person, I click on his name, and now he's going to tell me not only, now I have the submitter's first name and the submitter's last name, and the results that I'm seeing now are all the pages of testimony that he submitted. So that if there are other family members, one person may have fanned out and wrote many pages of testimony, And if you want to see all the people that they knew of that passed away during the Holocaust, once you have the name of a person, you can click on it and you'll see all of the people that they put in pages of testimony. Now here, we can see that they filled in 2 pages for the same person. One was done in the 1980s and one was done in the 1960s. So that is the research of Yad Vashem. If I want to go into the advanced search, it allows me to put in a maiden name, a first name. I can put in different places, other family members, or if I know here it already filled in for me, the name of the submitter of the pages of testimony. If I want to put in a different name, let's get rid of that for a second and rid of that. And I'm going to put in a last name of Horowitz. It's going to be a name I'll use today. Now I'm going to ask if it can put me on not a page of testimony, but I want a deportation transport. And now let's see what happens with the search. I know there were about 12,000 when I did the first search this afternoon. And now, because I'm asking for someone who is listed on a deportation transport, it comes up with 569. These are different kinds of lists, and we're going to see where exactly the information is from, and you get a summary of the information here. If I go inside to see the list, it gives me a little bit of information about the person that I clicked on. And I know the date that they were deported to the camp, but I don't have the information on when he died. But the information is translated into English. We know the number of the person in the transport. And if you wanted to get to Yad Vashem and look for this particular deportation list, it would be in that number. Bod Arlson, even though this website was just recently opened up, the search mechanism is not as advanced as most of the websites we see these days. And I'm going to get, I hope, yes, okay. And again, I'll use the name Horowitz. Website takes a while. We'll come back to them. All right, we're going to try to come back to them. They were having difficulties last week as well. That bar is in the way. Okay, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is one of the better museums that I have visited on this topic. And they have a lot of sections that you can learn things about the Holocaust. And when we go into remembering the survivors and victims, you can hear survivor testimonies, connect with people, and if I go into the database of the names, I can research names online. They allow me to do two kinds of searches. And they say that if you know somebody who's a survivor, you can help them to register in the survivor registry. But let's start off with a search, and we'll go again with the last name we've been using. And search. And they came up with over 4,000 people with the last name of Horowitz. Each of them is going to tell me the source of the information and what collection it can be found in. If there's an additional name of the person, sometimes there were Jewish names and there were secular names, and where the people, sometimes here we have, for instance, where the person was born. Sometimes we get a birth date. There is a lot of different information that you might find. Here is a source that are Jews who were deported from Luxembourg, and we can go in, click on it. And all we see is the information that was taken off of that specific form. You don't see the document itself. If I wanted to go instead and to look for a list, and I wanted, for instance, to see a list of transports, it would give me there are over almost 6,000 different kinds of transports, and I can filter that down, and I can look through them all and see if there is something that looks to me as if it's going to help me with the specific person that I am looking for and the kinds of information that you might be able to find. So let's see if I can pick one. So here it's allowing me to search names within the list or to view all of the names in the list. This was a list of inhabitants of the Lodz ghetto. And we're talking about the time was between 1941 and 44. The language is German and Polish. And various people went in and helped to document the information and make it available as a database. So they're giving you names and whatever other information for each person that they happen to have. Again, you don't see the list itself, but you see what they were able to transcribe. If you don't know what a Zuchschneider is, you could highlight, whoops, copy, and put it into Dr. Google. And it tells you that it's a cutter, somebody who was in the garment industry, tailor, a cutter. So there are ways of getting around the language difficulties now. You could also put it in a Google Translate. put Google Translate up there. I will, what happened to my word that I had? Hold on, where'd it go? There. Come on. Copy. I didn't tell Google that I wanted it to look up a name in German specifically, but it automatically detected that this was a German word, and it gives me the English equivalent. So it's rather easy to handle that. There are keyboard controls that will help you when the mouse doesn't seem to want to help. Control C, control plus the letter C will give you the ability to copy something. The control key and the letter V will let you paste it. Okay, let's go on. Here we are at the JDC. The JDC did a lot of very good and important work. Here I can put in a last name or a first and a last name. So again, I will use the same last name so we can see the different amounts of information that each organization has. Oh, I'm running out. Perhaps because of the day, there are lots of people who are doing searches. Here we go. So they have 500 records of people with the last name of Horowitz. They will tell you the other names that are on the document. For instance, here is something that's called Palestine remittances. This was from actually 1918, so it did not deal with the Shoah. Let's see if we can find something else. Here are people who went through Shanghai. They were in the refugee client list. Here's ones who were arriving in Australia from 1946. So we'll see what it says here. So we get information about the age, where they originated from, the name of the ship. So perhaps you can find information in a variety of different places that will talk about your ancestors. Jewish Gen, we talked about a variety of databases that they have available. I'm going to go to search and click databases, and I want the complete list of databases now. And I'd like to go and see what they have for the Holocaust database. And they're telling me of the 2.75 million entries. They have over 190 different data sets. And they tell you here what each of them is. If you were to click on it, it would give you a description of the database itself. But here, let's go in and, no, let's not do tell them today, please. And I want to search the database. And it tells me how many records there are in each of the different data sets. Again, if I were to click on the left-hand side on the link, it would show me a description of the database. But if I go over here, say for instance, the hidden children in France, it's going to give me information, the name of each of the different children, sometimes how old they were or when they were born, the place of birth if it was known, their nationality, the place that they were hidden, and if I were to go to that specific database, which page I could find that information available. Each time you open up one of those pages, it opens a separate window, so I don't have to go back and put the search in again. Sugihara saved many, many Lithuanian Jews and got them visas to get out of the country. Here's a list of people with the last name Horowitz, and you'll notice that sometimes it's spelled differently with a CZ instead of a TZ. There are other spellings. That's not the one that I was looking for. Hold on. Sometimes that with Horowitz, with H's, there's a G instead of the H. In any case, we have many databases that you can go through and try to find the person or persons that you might be able to see. Now, the card catalog of Ancestry.com. I put in a keyword of Arlson, I clicked search, and two databases come up. One is called the Registration of Foreigners and German Persecutees, and they have more than 10 million records. And there are passenger lists of displaced persons, and there they have over 1 million, almost 2 million people listed. So if I were to put in and here, I'm going to give them a first name, SCK, and I'm going to search. I can actually, as a paid member, view the manifest and see the specific information that relates to the people that I'm looking for. If I want to go back now to the other list, I'll try again. One more time. Okay. Let's go into this database and see what kind of information they have there. And we'll search. And here I have a document that I can look at for someone who left. They came from Dusseldorf, and you might be able to follow people and to be able to see where they ended up going and find more information about them. The Israel Genealogy Research Association. I want to go from our home page to searching the database. And I'm going to use a first name instead of a last name this time. And I'm going to go over here on the side to our filter of our Holocaust information. And remember, these are all people who survived the Holocaust. And I can check here. This is a list of survivors who were in Theresienstadt in 1945. And here I have Jewish women liberated from Bergen-Belsen. And the lists go on and on. There are more than 600 of them. It tells, this particular list gives me the year of birth, the town of origin, and this particular document was written in 1945, and it's in English. Again, you can go through and see where these records are from and try to locate some of your relatives. Let's see if the nice people at Bad Arolsen have perked up yet. No, the site's not being polite today. So I will open now to questions and other things that I can show you. Questions? Oh, my screen. No, I want to be here.
Are there any questions that you got? Oh, okay.
Oh, I was just wondering if somebody went to Canada after the war, where would that show? In which database?
There is an ancestry.com that is that has specific Canada information. Let me see if I can get some of it for you here. If I were to search their card catalog,
Okay.
and instead I'm going to put in Canada. And here they're going to tell me they have over 2,000 databases that deal with Canada. And you can go in and check each of them.
Okay.
Here they also have the ability by location to look for records. So here, the filter now shows me Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Go into records of birth, marriage, and death, or census lists, immigration and emigration.
Right. Okay.
And then you can do further research by going to a, now also when you're in the basic home page, you want to go in and look for more options, and you can put in a first name, say for instance, Esther Horowitz, and place that they might have lived, and you want to put in that you think they were in Canada.
Okay.
And see what comes up. And so you get a certain amount of information, and you can check it out and see whether it's right or not right. But there are a lot of databases that you might be able to access. Canada has more strict laws about releasing information, and their archives are not totally digitized, but you can also do a search on Google to see what other kinds of information is available now on the online archives of the Canadians.
Any other questions?
Can we also ask that you put your email address in on the chat for us so that we can have that for our records? Thanks. Does anybody else have anything they want to ask, Garri?
I did finally manage to get this filter working. Does everyone still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I put in the name Horowitz, and now we're seeing information that I didn't see the last time I did it. So now they suddenly have 3,000 records. And if I go into, oh, I know what I wanted to do. Hold on, let's see if I can get it. B-A-N-N-E-T, Anna. Okay, so now that they're being nice to me, maybe. Oh, here we are. Okay, so at the bottom of the page, it's now showing me the documents that they have that are connected with this specific name. And they have a whole lot of documentation. Where are the rest of the pages? More. One that had 15 images. Where is it? So you can check and see the different kinds of images that they have. They have cards from different places, and they have a lot of different details that are filled in. There are places you can get these translated. Jewish Gen has the opportunity to use what they call ViewMate and to post a card or a letter or something that you would like to have translated. And there are people who volunteer their time on a daily basis and go in and give you a summary of what's written and try to help you out and understand the data that you're seeing. So even though it's in a language that you don't, it's not your native tongue, you're still able to get some information about the people that are being spoken about. Sure. If anybody wants to reach out to me, Liron will put in the text box now, the chat box. I'll give you my email. And feel free to write me with any questions that you have. I'll do my best to try to help you out.
Any other questions before we end